All right, hello everyone. Welcome. Hello. Welcome to one more panel at the Virtual Youth Summit 2021. We're so glad to see everyone here. So good to see everyone joining now. Just give people a minute to connect. Awesome. So good to see everyone. Well, welcome to today's panel. I want to thank so much all of our panelists who are present here. We're going to introduce them further in a second. And I also want to acknowledge the live interpreters who are joining us today. So translating from English to Spanish, we have Gabriela Yeager. Para habilitar la traducción simultánea en español, haga clic en Interpretación en la parte inferior de la pantalla y seleccione el idioma español. Y in Portuguese, I also would like to acknowledge Ariadne, who is helping us translate from English to Portuguese. Para ativar a tradução simultânea para o português, é só clicar em Interpretation ou Interpretação na parte de baixo da tela e selecionar o idioma português. So welcome everyone. Today's panel theme is Opportunities and Challenges to Reimagine the Future. We're going to kick off with an artistic presentation by Ella Grace, a changemaker, singer, and grantee from the Changemakers Foundation that's present in the panel with us today as well. I hope you guys enjoy the song.
Hello, GCM. Welcome to the Virtual Youth Summit 2021. I am super honored and happy to be here. It is my pleasure. I'm a long-term lover and fan and advocate of GCM, a member, and I'm going to play a song for you to welcome you all in, and I hope you enjoy this gorgeous virtual space. And the song I'm going to play for you is called Come Back Home. It's a song about coming back to our roots, really connecting with where we're from, what we're doing, why we're here with the earth, and with a greater reason and purpose for living. So I hope you enjoy. There's a life that you own, where the trees and animals reach out to your soul. I know you will remember these hours. Come back home. There are ways that you know, and an ocean that breathes your heart into your bones. I know we will remember our power. Come back home. How can the kookaburra find her nest if this life strays her from what she knows best? And I know you've been looking to find some rest. Come home to what you know's best. It's a miracle that you still hear the call as the birds start to fall. Come home again. Come home, my friend. There's a life that you know. I can see it in your eyes, this place you made your home. I know you will remember this place I call surrender. The animals who will lead you to your stone. It's a miracle. We still hear a call as the birds start to fall. Come home again. again. Come home, my friends. There's a life that you own. I can see it in your eyes, this place you made your home. I know you will remember your power. Come back home.
Thank you so much for this beautiful gift, Ella. We are very thankful to have you in our community of global change makers. Now, without further ado, today's panel theme, as mentioned earlier, is opportunities and challenges to reimagine the future. We are here to discuss the future that lies ahead of us and how young people like you and me can shape it to make it more inclusive and sustainable without leaving anyone behind. At our virtual table today, we have 4 incredible panelists representing some of the partner organizations that Global Changemakers has worked with. We have Angela joining us from Serbia and representing the Youth Initiative for Human Rights. The YRHR has supported the Global Changemakers Mentorship Program, and we have also hosted workshops together with the common goal to support the young leaders present. We have Camila joining us from Brazil and representing the major group for children and youth. GCM has supported the youth forum conducted by MGCY last year, as well as selected youth-led projects through mentoring and advice. We have Malia joining us from the USA and representing Proper Daily and the Shawn Mendes Foundation. Through SMF, GCM has supported the selection of youth-led projects to receive grants that are helping them scale their impact even further through the Wonder Grants program. And finally, we have Josephine joining us from France and representing the UNESCO section for higher education. This year, GCM has supported UNESCO's Future of Education initiative through consultations with young changemakers and continues to support UNESCO's efforts to help youth create the future that they want in education. So to get started in our conversation today, I'd like to go around and ask each one of you to introduce yourselves further and already answer the question, what is the future that you are reimagining and creating through the work that you do? Let's start with Angela.
Okay. Hi, thank you, Yasmin. First of all, thank you for inviting me, and thank you to Ella. This song was amazing, and it is such a nice way to start this panel. So my name is Angela Savic. I come from Belgrade, Serbia, and I work at the Youth Initiative for Human Rights, which is an organization that functions as a network in several Balkan countries. And it deals with the topics of human rights and transitional justice. So that is mostly what I work on, and that is how I actually started working at the Youth Initiative for Human Rights. And we are still in process of reimagining the future for both of ourselves and our activists, because a big part of the Youth Initiative for Human Rights is made from our activists from Serbia, but also other countries. And we are still trying to figure it out. I really don't have the magical recipe, but we are building it all together.
Beautiful, Angela. Thank you. I think we're all in that same position, building the future as we go and understanding what's our role in the world and the future that we want to see, right? That's great. Let's go with Camila.
Thank you, Yasmin. It's a great pleasure to be here today talking about this super important thematic. So thank you for the invitation. As Yasmin said, my name is Camila Batista. I'm from Latin America, from Brazil specifically. I have heard that we have a really large audience from Brazil, so it's really happy to be here. Boa tarde, pessoal. So I'm a social entrepreneur, currently working as COO at Migraflix. Migraflix is a social startup that works with the social and economic inclusion of migrants and refugees throughout Latin America. And I wear a second hat at the Major Group, which has the partnership with Global Changemaker. The Major Group for Children and Youth is a platform for children and youth to interfere in certain intergovernmental and allied process at United Nations. We basically guarantee that youth have a voice on global conversations on decision-making process. And answering the question, I think the future I'm imagining and at the same time trying to make it a reality is a space where children and youth doesn't have to ask permission to participate in conversations that are shaping our future. So this is what I am doing at the Major Group. And at the same time, besides doing the advocacy part at Migraflix, we are really thinking about a future where migrants, they are accepted in the host community, they are integrated with the host community, and they have opportunities for income generation as entrepreneurs. So I think these two things, migration and youth empowerment, are my passion, and I would love to share more about it with you today.
Awesome. That's beautiful, Camila. A future where no one is left behind, and that youth and children can not only be at the decision tables, but actually contribute to the conversation and make it happen afterwards. That's beautiful. It's super powerful. Let's go with Josephine now.
Hello, so I'm Josephine. I'm working in the organization of the next World Higher Education at the UNESCO, which is a decade event. And for the first time, we have a youth involvement in the conference. So to answer your question, I think that the future for which we are working is basically a future where there's more and more accessibility for youth to higher education, but also where non-formal education is more and more recognized in the labor world, to really open the room and space for youth from any kind of backgrounds to enter in the working world and in the education world. But also it would be a future where more ways of learning, more systems of knowledge would be present and would be recognized in the system. And I'm thinking, for instance, about indigenous ways of learning and indigenous knowledges that are still too less, not enough recognized, and even indigenous languages, for instance. So our wish would be to have more room for it, more recognition, and even more indigenous organizations that would be recognized in the world of labor market.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Josephine. The work that you're doing is beautiful, and it's so great to see UNESCO making an effort to make education more inclusive, go beyond formal education, recognize traditional knowledge and other forms of knowledge. It's really beautiful, and I'm sure that young people have a lot to say about the topic and would be able to contribute to it a lot. And now let's go with Malia.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Malia Males, and I am based in Los Angeles, and I work for a social impact agency called Proper Daily. At Proper Daily, we work with brands, nonprofits, and then also high-profile individuals on all of their philanthropic work. And so I'm here today. I manage day-to-day of the Shawn Mendes Foundation, and I'm very excited to be here because we love Global Changemakers, as they are our partner for our Wonder Grants program. Shawn and the Shawn Mendes Foundation are incredibly passionate, and our focus is really on youth empowerment and making sure that we are getting support directly into the hands of young activists. And so we do that through our partnership with Global Changemakers. So very excited to be here. I think definitely, I think in my teens had some experiences in youth activism myself through Girl Scouts that really did completely change the trajectory of my life. And so my hope and like my personal journey in this is making sure that all young people feel that they have that moment where they realize that someone is listening to them and someone is going to help empower their message and that it matters. And so through our day-to-day and through my work with Shawn, that's really kind of my passion in this area.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Malia. And I think, of course, a common thing that all of you have in the panel today is that all of your organizations are betting on young people to think critically about the world and to reimagine our future. All of us believe that young people have something to say, and not only to say, but to do, right? They have a role in rebuilding the future. But I wanted to ask all of you, why trust the young people in this role? Why the young people? Why not the most experienced ones? Why not the children that are still, learning how the world works? Why the youth? Anyone who wants to jump in can start.
I can go. So I definitely think that young people have had the experiences and are looking at what is going to impact them looking forward. They have the biggest kind of thinking around the biggest dreams and the biggest, like, how do we get started? But also I think that especially this generation has such a lens for equity in everything that we are doing. And making sure that all voices are heard is so, so important. And I think that especially kind of this age group and is really, really leading that charge.
Yeah, absolutely. And Camila, in your introduction, you mentioned, right, you're doing a lot of work to ensure that children and youth don't have to ask for permission to say what they think. And also in your work with migrants, you have also worked in the past with human rights and other marginalized groups, so to speak. Why trust them to bring the change that we want to see?
Yeah, amazing, Yasmin. I think this is something that it's deeply rooted on my personal belief and on the past years working with young people and supporting young people to navigate super complex ecosystems such as United Nations, like government roundtables, where there is a lot of like power struggle, power pressure, like diplomatic spaces. I'm each day more convinced that we have an extremely important role on those conversations. And I would picture like in three main reasons. And I think the first reason is fresh perspectives. So somehow young people, they come with new ideas. They come with their personal experience leading grassroots organizations, leading local organizations. And they come with new ideas that sometimes, we are in a panel, we take the microphone and we start telling about what we are doing in our communities. And people are saying, but how much money do you have for that? And sometimes it's not about like money, it's about like the braveness, it's about like the passion. So those fresh perspectives for people that somehow are on their comfortable zones, on those positions, it's a shock of reality, but at the same time, a pulse, a force that shakes those traditional spaces, and that, on my opinion, start promoting change. Then I think the second aspect would be like courage, boldness. So I think young people, when they enter in those spaces, they are not thinking about, oh my God, my job, my career. It's not that we don't have nothing to lose. On the opposite side, we have the generation, the future in front of us to lose. But we are so worried about how to shape and how to make part of those conversations that we have the boldness to raise the hand and to talk about examples and to really tell about what we believe on doing. And then I think the third aspect would be, and maybe I have already mentioned it because I think actually it's the most important one, and I think it's the passion. So sometimes, you enter in a room and it's the same level of voice. It's people are like saying the same stuff, and then someone comes and the tone of the voice is different, like the heart is beating because there is like passion connected to it. And I'm not saying that adults doesn't have, it's not about that, but it's just about like the fact that I have been having the opportunity to cross with many young people, many young change makers. And I think we have a lot of them right here on the audience, but I feel that those young people, they are like, their cows are their lives. And this makes for them, it's so important to be there and to be active changers. So yeah, that's what I think.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's super inspiring, Camila. Thank you for sharing. And I want to go further on what you said about bringing in fresh perspectives. Because, Angela, you work with transitional justice, and that means that young people that you work with are looking at the past and they're looking at the future, and they want to make things different. They want to transition into a more just, inclusive society. Can you tell us more about why trust young people to do that? What has been their role in Serbia and beyond, in the other countries that you work with, to ensure transitional justice and to make the future different and more aligned with what they want as young people?
I very much liked your question about why we should trust the youth. And it made me thinking that it's not about trust, it's, about giving them freedom, because they are the ones who are going to live in that world that they will create. And so they should create it on their own terms. And we should just be there to support it and help it in any way that we can. And when we talk about the transitional justice in Serbia, it's a very hard uh, topic because the last war that occurred in the Balkans finished in 1999. So we are basically, more than 20 years um, uh, far from that. And there are people who are born after that who are just now, getting into activism, getting into, school, discovering things that they like, and they are not burdened by the war itself. They didn't live through it, but what they are burdened with is the role of media and the influence of their community and their parents and what they hear in schools and so on. And here, because the government structure didn't really change much since the 90s, the people who were in power then are in power now, and their first priority is not peace and stability in the region. They are using the those warmongering rhetorics to rule by creating fear and pushing the narrative that they are the only ones that is stopping us from being in war with everyone, and that is not the case. And so you have this generation of young people that are amazing, and I know that some of them are also in this panel and listening, and I'm very grateful for them to them because of that. And they can change things. They are the change makers. I really love the word. And it may be hard because I know that one guy who is now in the panel, he didn't have the support from his family to, deal with these topics, to, enroll in our, workshops and programs and so on. But he is the person who asked the most amazing questions, and he's not afraid to ask everything. And I remember once that I was taking him to the trial for the war crimes, and he wanted to know so many things that I was at one moment like, I don't know. Like, I will help you discover everything, but I don't know. So yeah, that's why I believe that it is on them. They are not afraid to ask questions and seek for answers that we maybe didn't discover yet.
Absolutely, Angela. One of the roles that the United Nations acknowledges for young people is critical thinkers, is really look and question things and not be afraid to go there to the topics that maybe people don't want to talk about. Maybe it's a cultural taboo, but young people have the courage, the boldness, like Camila was saying as well, to question those things, right? And I want to bring back something that you guys mentioned as well. You spoke about young people bringing fresh perspectives and being bold to ask those questions and so on. And Josephine, higher education and education in general, has been a pretty traditional space when in regards to decision making. Historically, it's only recently that young people are getting involved in making decisions about their own education and what's considered knowledge, formal knowledge, and what's not. And more, the labor market is asking for different things that perhaps we didn't get at school or university. For you, what's the role of young people? Why trust the young people to reimagine education and higher education in general?
Well, yes, as you say, it's very recent that youth voices are listened in the higher education system, because it's a system that's very traditional, that's very can be very conservative. So it's hard for youth to make their voice heard. But also it would be nonsense not to have those voices heard, because of course youths are at the core of the higher education system, because they are the one that are the most concerned about it. They are the key stakeholders of higher education. So youth made it actually made their voice heard, and there's more and more student movements. And because students are the most active and the most activist, how can I say, population, of course, they turn their preoccupations to education and higher education. So this is why I think students are also one of the most active stakeholders claiming for change in higher education. And we can see all of the students' movement there have been in the past years for climate or for other changes. For instance, in France, during the Yellow Jacket movement, students were really at the forefront of the protest. And this is why youths are not waiting for anyone to listen to them, that we have to listen to them. I mean, the system has to listen to youth, because they are not waiting for anyone to say, yes, we'll listen to you, but they are already acting, they are already doing things. So we just have to listen, and we just have to do what we have to do, because they are not waiting. And I think this is the most important thing to consider about youth.
Great. I think, yeah, I agree 100%. And I agree that especially what you said about students and youth getting more and more active these days, we see this trend, right, of young people getting tired of waiting to have a voice, waiting to have the 30 years of experience to be able to join an influential organization and then be able to say something. We need it now, right? We want it now. We see the challenges that our community faces, and we want the people in power to see it, and we want to do something about it. So thinking about this in your perspective, how do you think that the current environment that we're living in, the current system, accelerates or hinders this process for young people to create change? What do you think are some opportunities that we have nowadays that will make young people more influential and give them a voice? And on the other hand, what are some of the things that would hinder that process, that young people have really to be attentive and to be careful with and to fight against, perhaps? Let's see, does anyone want to start to answer this? If anyone already has ideas.
I can continue.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would tend to think that one of the opportunities for youth is that most of the public debate now globally is happening on social media, and youth are actually the one who master the most social media. So it's a huge power they have to really master this tool. And even if, of course, there's a constant change, constant reinvention of social media, but they are always those who the quicker can relearn and master it. So I guess it's really a power for them to have the right and the possibility of talking and saying what should be done. And on the other hand, of course, the constraint will still be that the action, the levels of action are still held by older generations, more conservative generations, and sometimes heavy institutions that might be a bit longer to react, which might give impatience to the youth, even if hopefully there will be a change of generations at some point in the power.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Josephine. Would anyone like to compliment?
Angela? Well, after she said everything that I also wanted to say, no. I agree 100% that the internet is their biggest asset, because it's such an enormous platform that they have, that we all have, and they are basically born with it. I am 28, so I didn't have a smartphone growing up in the elementary school. I had it a bit later, but they have it now, and they are so much more natural with it. And like the only obstacle that they can, overcome is to break that, wall between, youth and the decision makers, to make them really, hear them and listen to them. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Camila, would you like to respond to that maybe, since you're bringing youth so close to the decision makers? What has been your experience?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with her. I think it's definitely about like how to guarantee that we have capacity building opportunities, and how we guarantee that this asset of like internet, social media, that it's well used, but to not keep saying about like the same thing. I would like to add, for example, another asset that I think it's extremely important to our generation, which is related to entrepreneurship. And I tell that, for example, as myself being an entrepreneur, but also as someone that is also always surrounded by about other young entrepreneurs. And I was listening to a podcast this week, and something really colored my attention in terms of what is the moment that we live in history. And I mean, the podcast, I mean, the presenter, basically she was saying that we live right now the best time in history to start a new company. And I mean, then it was like laying out a lot of like arguments for that. And some of the arguments would be like, I mean, we have many communities for entrepreneurs, we have many communities for young change makers. For global change makers is one example. We also have a lot of like content for free in the internet. So nowadays it's really easy for someone to not start something from the scratch, but to go on the internet to try to look for other perspectives and to start from a different knowledge, having some different knowledge before. She was also saying about, for example, that we have nowadays many more sources of capital available. So we have like venture capital, we have crowdfunding, microcredit, angel investors. So I mean, we have all these like many options and possibilities for someone. And I'm not saying that it's all of them. We know that there are marginalized communities that unfortunately are not accessing, but somehow, I mean, we have all those opportunities. And then another thing that relates with social media and with the internet, it's, for example, today, I mean, the costs of failure are more close to zero than ever before. And that's why, for example, if you want to launch a company, you can go on Twitter, you can post, hey, I'm thinking about doing that. And then a lot of young people would start like responding to you. There is this application, I don't know who used it, which is called Quora. If you have a question, you just go post your question, and then like thousands of people like start responding to you. This is for free. And we are talking about making like consumers and people available for everyone. So this is something that really impacts me and that I really appreciate, because somehow we have like a lot of challenges in our society. We have like climate change, we have government saying that we don't belong here, we have like capacity building and employment, etc. But somehow, if I am an optimistic person myself, if there is a way out to this conversation, and I mean, to what is hindering and what is accelerating the change, I think technology and social media is definitely one of the great assets.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Camila. Malia, would you like to contribute to the conversation as well?
Yeah, I think going off a little bit of what Camila said about like the accessibility of information, I also think that creates and builds community. And so, especially in the areas of activism, if you're interested in something, you're able to go online and build a community of like-minded and build coalitions that are worldwide. I think one of the things that I see as a barrier is that the way, especially with the Shawn Mendes Foundation, that we view activism is sort of like a pyramid with three different kind of levels of involvement. So there's the majority of people who have like some knowledge, and or they're just starting out and they're just learning. Then you have people who like know what they care about or have a specific information set. And then you have kind of what you would be your more experienced activists who have a specific topic that they really dive into. And I think that sometimes when in the current system of socials and how we view the internet, sometimes the expectation is that you have to be at the top of that pyramid and you have to know about every single issue. And so I think a barrier to that change is actually created within the community of making sure that if you're learning about a topic, that lowering that any stigma associated with someone saying, I don't know. And I think that it's so important that we really focus on making sure that that bottom of the pyramid and people who know that they really want to get involved, but they don't necessarily know where or how, that we're making sure that the people who have a specific kind of deep interest or expertise in one area are really open to being like, you know what, that is okay that you don't know. That's so great that you want to learn. Here's where you can start. And making sure to share and create a very safe space to be able to raise your hand and say it. I think especially in the last years, the world has been having so many different crazy occurrences, and there's so many different areas and things happening and topics that often socials will make you feel like you need to be an expert in all of it, and that you also need to be contributing to the conversation if you don't know. And so making sure that as we're moving to make change, that we're doing so in a way that is also kind of opening up to say, if you don't know about it, it is totally okay. And here is how you can learn. Is, I think, a huge barrier to entry that some people will just be nervous that if they're not an expert, they shouldn't be contributing.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense, Malia. The other day I was listening to a Brazilian activist, and she was saying how, like, I don't want to be at the top, because if I'm at the top as an activist, it means there's a bottom. It means I'm on top of other people from the same, that maybe have the same interest in terms of knowledge. And so knowledge sharing and access to technology and the internet is something that you all brought up somehow as like challenges and opportunities that young people have. And I think both of those are great, and they do create lots of opportunities for young people, but they're not widely accessible to everyone. We see the technology divide is increasing more and more access to rights has become digital. If you want to access education opportunities, job opportunities, finances, right? You need access to a computer these days and the internet. So how would you say in your experience that young people can help break those access barriers, access to knowledge? You spoke a little bit about that already, Malia, and also access to technology. How can we make sure we don't leave anyone behind who wants to help build this future with us? Does anyone want to start? Angela, go ahead.
I think it's just, about going out there and talking to people, to your peers or whoever. We can't expect from, for example, our activists that are high schoolers to help in certain way, but they can, be active in some, in our, street actions, for example, that we very much used to have before the pandemic, and now with the coronavirus that stopped a little bit. But I think it's that, like, just go out, talk to people in your school, talk to people you meet in your student exchanges, and that nothing beats that spoken word. And we are all human libraries. And as for the internet, yes, everything is online, and it is a human right nowadays, because if everything, if there is a whole world, existing and operating, and you can't be a part of it, then you are not, practicing all your rights that you should, you're being left behind.
Wow, that's very true and powerful. And Angela, earlier you were speaking about the boldness that young people have to question things. We also should be bold to start the conversation, even if the conversation is hard and it requires reviewing our system and how we operate as human beings, right? That's super true. Does anyone else want to compliment?
I think I can compliment. I think this is key because we know that technology is a trend, and we know that it's going to be like each time more accessible. But right now, I mean, at least at MGCY, each time we do like a forum, talking about like accessibility is key. How can we guarantee that we are accessing like most vulnerable communities, like remote zones, people that are not like even, they don't even know that we are having those type of conversations online today. So I think, I mean, there is a lot of important things to be discussing. And I think, for example, to make offline equipments for people to have a place to go if they are not like connected nowadays sometimes. And I say for Migraflix, for migrants, if a migrant doesn't have a cell phone, maybe it won't be able to like access your personal number in Brazil, because the whole system is online. And this is really complex, because if you doesn't have your personal number, your personal code, after world, you can get a fine. So it's completely like, you don't have a cell phone, you don't have money to buy a cell phone, and then you get a fine because you don't have the personal code. So it's kind of like a snowball. And it's extremely important for us to, as you said, Yasmin, to start the conversation and to see what are the opportunities. For example, in Migraflix, we are designing this like leasing for cell phones and equipments. So it's like really small amounts of money that low-income communities pay. So for example, $5, they access the cell phone. If they want, they can give it back. So for example, if something happens and they don't have any more like the money to keep paying those $5, they give it back the cell phone and it's fine. And with the leasing, after like 1 year, 1.5 years, the cell phone is yours. So this is the type of initiatives that, I mean, we are trying to go to the private sector to try to guarantee that we can operate, that we can create more accessibility. And not saying that it's the answer, it's like one answer, and maybe, I mean, we can have more. And so
absolutely, we can and we will have more, trusting the young people watching us to lead those changes. Does anyone else want to contribute to this conversation about not leaving anyone behind, breaking the technology divide, the knowledge divide, or any examples that you might have in mind as well? Malia, you're muted.
Sorry. So one of the things that we're also working on at Proper Daily is another client of ours, Carly Kloss, is really involved in the digital divide and does a lot of work, even within the US, on especially with the shutdowns for coronavirus, the amount of students who were just completely left out of digital school. There was no ability to have internet or have devices or access any of the information that they needed to in order to just progress regularly through school. And this is obviously the same worldwide. And I think that one of the things that we are doing is she is a judge for the MIT Solve Equitable Classrooms Challenge. And so I think that as all of you are doing your work, I think that there are some really interesting solutions coming out of that, as well as are also through other programs like X Prize, or that are doing more tech access challenges. And I think I would challenge everyone to go, and as they're doing any sort of projects or work, but to also think about how you can be more inclusive in regard to a lack of internet access. Because we are all saying, you know, use your socials and build community that way. It definitely is most important to make sure that you also are able to build that face-to-face connection and give people the ability to use. So for instance, one of the challenges that we reviewed that I was just fascinated by was that in a lot of communities, when data is expensive for a cell phone, it's much more expensive than it is to use a messaging platform. So figuring out if you can use WhatsApp to create learning materials and use distribute information within messaging apps, because it is so much cheaper in data in regard to using some sort of online platform or other app, and kind of making sure that as all of you are out doing your projects, to try and educate yourself on factors like that, so that when you are building something out, it is a lower bandwidth, so that it is therefore more accessible worldwide.
That's a great tip, Malia. Thank you for sharing. I agree 100% with using the resources that are available to the community that we want to serve. And I think all access to knowledge and access to technology is something that cuts across all of the issues that we're working with. And so thinking about how can I make this more accessible? How can we use the tools that they already know and that they can access? That's great. I really love that. Josephine, do you want to answer the question as well on how we can contribute to breaking the knowledge and technology divide?
Actually, I think that all of the other girls have mostly answered the question, but I indeed testified in the past months talking with various organizations. I could actually testify that mostly in Africa or in East Asian countries, it's been very difficult to continue having a good connection with the students. I mean, the teachers have been saying how difficult it's been to stay in touch with their students and to have a proper way of sharing content, learning content with them. Some of them having a good connection, others without having a good connection. So it's definitely, I mean, the issue. And I feel like it would be the responsibility of the states, of the schools, to guarantee access, to guarantee accessibility on the one hand, of the network on the second hand, to guarantee that students would have the tools, some computers, etc. But of course, in developing countries, it's more difficult for them to guarantee it. So it's a big the divide. It's hard to close it. But for sure, in the coming years, there will be some improvements.
Yeah, me too. I'm hopeful for that as well. And we got a question from the audience that I wanted to pass on to you guys as well. And by the way, anyone listening, please send your questions to the Q&A box or in the chat. I keep an eye on them always, so don't worry, you're seen. So if you want to send in any questions, comments, feel free to do that. We have someone requesting an example of when a young change maker has surprised you. So thinking about some of the things that we've been discussing in the panel and the work that you have done working with young people directly, can you tell us stories of when a young person has really surprised you in their capacity to not only reimagine the future, but create change in their work as well? Does anyone come to mind already? Angela, go ahead.
Yeah, I am always, surprised and amazed with how young some of our activists are, because, it's really exceptional to be like 16, 17 and to want to deal with those topics such as transitional justice and dealing with the past. And, you should have a lot of empathy to do so, and that is fascinating on an everyday level for me.
Awesome. Does anyone else have stories to share? Just any thoughts on the question? Malia, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had like the complete privilege of meeting Zaila Avant-Garde, who just won the National Spelling Bee. And she honestly surprised me because her first reaction was to think through all of the things that had to happen for her to be there and for her to win, and how she should reimagine that system. And I think that that's something that's so common among so many of the young change makers that we work with. But I think that to have that reaction where your whole life is changing and something so big has happened, but to have that immediate of like, I know that the reason that I'm here is because these 5 things had to happen and I had the ability to make that happen and so many people don't, was just honestly for that to be like her immediate reaction to winning, and having her whole life change was just really inspiring and really a good way to reset about what we're doing and how we're moving to empower youth, because I think that that is more often than not the reaction that young people have when something big happens or something changes for them, is to look at how to make the world better for other people.
Yeah, that's super inspiring. That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing, Malia. Camila, Josephine, do you have any stories to share?
I was trying to think about one person specifically, but as something, I mean, it wasn't coming to my mind. I think I would like to say about more a situation that involves like many young people So last year on MGCY, we have done, and Young Global Changemakers, they were really involved with us on the, what we call it, Leadership Innovation Award initiative for migration. So basically we received more than 350 ideas from many young people around the world, initiatives that would solve problems on shaping narratives on migration, leveraging technology for migration, and also addressing irregular migration. And then, I mean, on those three topics, a lot of like ideas. We selected a few finalists to participate in this seed funding award competition. GC was there with us and mentoring the finalists. It was really interesting. But I think for me, what really touched me is that when we were doing the preparations for the pitches, where they would be on a jury with, I don't know, like people from big companies, government leaders, diplomats. I mean, there was this really tense feeling and environment. And I mean, it really touched me how people, and I think Malia mentioned it, that they are able to be vulnerable. And it's so beautiful because they can say, they come and they open their hearts. I'm nervous. And I mean, they deal with it. I mean, they're afraid, but somehow they pass it, the situation, and they start phrasing, and you see that they are shaking, but that's fine, because somehow, I mean, the way they embrace vulnerability makes it so special. So I think this is something that I really admire, and it's a characteristic that I'm all the time like trying to look and bring for myself, because sometimes we just want to hand, right? No, this is not mine, this is not mine. But it's so amazing to see how young people are dealing each time better with like failing, with being ashamed, with all those like difficult situations.
That's awesome, Camila, especially because the theme of the summit is resilience and strength in the work of changemakers. So we have been discussing a lot about how can we become more resilient and embrace our vulnerability, and also use that as a way of courage to continue creating the change that we want to see. That's beautiful. Josephine, do you have any stories to share?
Yes, I was thinking about someone still in this thematic of indigenous knowledge and indigenous culture. There's a girl I've met through my work at the UNESCO. She's Mexican, from an indigenous community called Mixtec community. And what's always surprised me from her is that she manages to do change at a very, very small scale, which is also how you make things change, right? And in particular in the language area, she's really claiming for the recognition of her language, for its visibility in the public space. So whenever she meets people, whenever she goes to the office, and she works at the UNESCO in Mexico, she teaches people some Mixtec languages. Whenever she's around someone, she teaches them a few words. She also had the opportunity recently to act in a film, and she made a video where she was teaching the actors the words. During the pandemic, she also launched, some videos where she was teaching some specific words. So whatever the means, whatever, if it's a video, if it's on the social media, if it's around her, if it's at the office, she manages to slowly, increase the presence of the language, even if it's a few words, to really have this present in the mind of the people, that there are other languages in the country, there are other languages, I mean, in the world, of course, but in one country, there's more than one, and especially indigenous languages. So I feel like she's a great example of small changes.
That's awesome. It's beautiful. I really like that, the desire to make your tradition alive and your culture alive, and make sure that it's respected, and that your knowledge is also considered knowledge. And I think that's beautiful. We got two questions here from the audience. Maybe I can merge both of them because they're similar. So one person is asking us, what is your advice for this generation that needs to engage more people for change? So mobilize young people for change. And then someone is asking, what if you're an introvert and creating change requires interacting with a lot of people, creating a network and talking about your idea and speaking up and all of that? What if you're an introvert? How do you deal with that? Does anyone want to answer those questions?
I think for the first question for how to engage more people, I think it's making sure that as you are kind of moving in the world, that you are doing so with an open mind, and that you're understanding that different viewpoints and different people who maybe have one point of view or potentially operating out of fear or not knowing. And so making sure that as you're bringing people in, to make sure that you're doing so in an inclusive and a safe way for others. So thinking through messages that you're putting out and how that might be read by certain groups, or putting out, making sure that as you're talking about a topic that you're saying it's an invitation for others to learn, versus saying that, don't get involved unless you entirely agree with exactly what I'm saying. I think there is power in creating a very open and safe dialogue, and making sure to kind of keep that as you're bringing people into the conversation. And for those of you who are introverts and who are operating in the world, I think that it's making sure to take care of yourself, because obviously there are times where you're going to want to talk to people and to be communicating, but I think that it's making sure to check in with yourself and make sure that you're feeling like you are putting yourself in spaces that you feel comfortable in. As well as, I think there's other ways. I think that you can make graphics for social media if you're not comfortable putting yourself in front of the camera. I think that you can also, one of the biggest things, and one of the things that Sean is really passionate about, is passing the mic. So you, as someone who is trying to make a difference in the space, maybe that's by amplifying the voice of someone who is more comfortable putting themselves out there, and uplifting and sharing those messages that someone else is putting forward if you're not necessarily ready to speak to it yourself.
Definitely, yeah. There's many ways of creating change. I don't have to always be the spokesperson. You don't have to always be there's many ways, and there's space for everyone, right? Would anyone else like to complement this conversation?
I liked and appreciated very much the question about the and the advice with introvert people, because yeah, so I don't really know if that can be seen from my public appearances, but I am actually an introvert. I just feel very comfortable with all of you guys, and somehow also I like to talk about these subjects. And so that is what I wanted to say. You find what you are passionate about, and it is about taking care of yourself, and you should not do anything that makes you even remotely uncomfortable. But sometimes you have to find that like fine line between that and between pushing yourself just to go a little bit outside of your box, circle, bubble, star, whatever shape you want to call it. And to just always have in mind that you are like smart. Your questions are not stupid. No one is going to think that you are asking something dumb, and that is something that you should know, because I always have that problem that I won't be asking questions if I am not completely read everything about the subject. And so maybe if something I didn't read, then I can feel free and safe to ask questions. That is not the case, because like, think about yourself. Would you think that someone is dumb if they approach you and ask you questions? Of course you wouldn't. You are always grateful and amazed that that person had a was brave enough to like come and ask for what they want. So like, it is very much important to have all those things in mind. Like, you are enough. Like, whoever you are and whatever you are doing, it's enough, and you have all the rights in the world to talk and ask questions. And it may be hard, but like, maybe you will see that it's it is made for you and it suits you.
Yeah, that's very reassuring. Thank you so much, Angela. Would any of the other girls like to compliment? Camila, Josephine?
Yeah, definitely. So on mobilization, I think it was the first question. I think I would say like partnerships. So I think the key success for mobilizing like more young people, and each time more people, is like you don't need to do the job from yourself. Like you can go reach out other organizations, other partners, and always create this capillarity by like really respecting and working with other partners. So yeah, I think this is a key point for mobilization. At least that's everything that we use it a lot on Migraflix. We don't think we are like mobilizing like many migrants in Colombia, in Brazil alone. We always do with grassroots organizations, community organizations. And then on the introvert question, I think it's a really important, a really important question, and I completely agree with Malia and Angela on like respecting yourself, and at the same time like trying to understand how to create your comfortable zone and being like super practical. I think nowadays we have like some communities and some spaces where you can create this comfortable zone. So I mean, there are like courses, there are like spaces you can go that there will be like 5 people and that they will respect to you, but at the same time they will be like trying to engage you so that you can little by little like start to open yourself and to collaborate. I think those communities, and I talk because one of my best friends, it's super introverted person, and it was like super important to find those communities, those like friends and spaces that you can like start growing and little by little. And also to, I think, to really try to understand like your way of communicating. As Malia said, arts is one way. Like nowadays with internet, sometimes you can just write a text and you can go, but don't pretend that you are an extrovert using like text, because then afterwards you won't be able to secure that in case you are in front of that person. So just embrace, yeah, that's me, that's my characteristics. And when you embrace that, I mean, people, they respect, they want to learn more from you, they want to try to understand more, and we have a lot of like empathy. So if you go on that way and you try to really embrace your characteristics and accept your way of being, I think it's key.
That's beautiful. I love that. Be who you are, embrace that part of yourself and use it to make change. It's still possible, very much. Josephine, do you want to add to the conversation at all?
I just have maybe a small comment to do that's a bit different from what you guys have been saying. Would be to say that most of the actors probably are very shy. So it doesn't mean that when you get in the public space, you can be a shy person, but have kind of a public character, which doesn't mean it should be a fake you, but would be a way for you to wear a sort of social costume that just allows you to be protected by this figure and be able to speak in a kind of safe zone that you're building for yourself, unseen. So that would be my advice.
Interesting. Yeah. Now that you say it, Josephine, I've seen a lot of the actors that I like saying in interviews that they're actually very shy and that theater classes have helped them and so on. So maybe that's one way to go about it too. Great.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And we had a question on the chat about how can we make this, everything that we're talking about, more practical, right? So going a little bit beyond the imagination part of the future, which is something that we've been talking about, and making it more practical. So I love to go around and ask you girls to share what are some of the resources that have been useful for you in bringing your ideas to reality. Maybe some of the communities as well, because you mentioned, creating communities one way to go about it. Maybe some of the resources and opportunities that your organizations provide to go beyond the imagination step. Let's start with Josephine this time.
So the question is, how can we make those theoretical conversations real, right?
Correct, yes. And any resources, opportunities that might help young people in doing that?
Well, first of all, my advice would always be to actually do what you want to do. So not wait for other people to say you if it's correct or not, because everybody would always have his opinion. So if you have an idea, and you start asking 10 people about it, maybe 6 people will tell you it's a bad idea for this or this or this reason, and will tell you how difficult it is because they are pessimistic, because they are frustrated by their own actions. So maybe they would discourage you. So this would be my advice, not wait for other people to give you confidence, but to have your own confidence in doing the things. But I feel like I'm going away from the question. So, I mean, act would be my answer. And yes, that's what I would say.
Awesome. Josephine, are there any opportunities or resources that the UNESCO provides in helping young people who would like to bring their ideas to reality, especially in regards to education?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, one of the expertise of the UNESCO is actually to have some events and forums, summits, I mean, gatherings held at the international level, but also at the local levels. So I guess that this is an opportunity for youth to make their recognition, I mean, to be heard, to be recognized, and to show they are here, they are present, they have ideas. So most of these events are either public, accessible to anyone, or in streaming now. So I think that those events are the opportunity of making their voice heard, and having some projects visibilized.
Absolutely. Thank you, Josephine. And yes, stay tuned, guys. There's lots of opportunities there as well. Camila, what about you, Migraflix and MGCY?
So I think being like super practical, and I really like to be, I'm the kind of person that likes to be thinking about projects, even though I am not like going to be the one leading them afterwards, but I like the creative part of like drawing projects, etc. So I think for me, like the more practical step for you to, if you want to become an entrepreneur, or if you want to design a project, you want to start to like driving change. And I know it would sound cliche, but I think it's like step ahead, one step. Like if you have an idea, just like take a paper and do a Canva for it. Because when things are on your mind, it's one thing. When they are in the paper, it's another. So, I mean, if you want to engage with migration, go Google all migration organizations, send messages. I want to be a volunteer. I want to do this. Send your resume, send a curriculum. So don't, don't be afraid of receiving the no. When you are like, stop it, you already have the no. So go and maybe like try and really reach out. I have always been like this person that, oh, I want to know more about it. So I go on LinkedIn and I send a message. And maybe this person is thinking that I'm crazy, but okay, it's just a way of like putting myself in front of the world and going for it. And then in terms of resources, one thing that I have written down here, I'm a podcast addicted. I just love it. Like I do it while I am washing dishes, while I am like cleaning my home, my bedroom, because I think it's super useful way for us to access knowledge nowadays. And so I go and, oh, okay, I want to learn more about like youth empowerment, and you go and you listen to the podcast. Oh, more about like, I don't know, user experience and technology and platforms. So this is a super useful resource that I like to recommend, because the world is changing at a rapid pace, and it's something like useful and free and easy. And then for those specifically interested on migration, reach out to me. We have the Major Group is a free platform for all young people to engage on those processes. We can definitely have more conversations. We have like open call to actions for people. I work specifically on the migration working group. So we have several groups by region, by thematic. So yeah, that's also another practical type for those specifically interested on the thematic.
Great. Going off of that, we also have the Young Changemakers podcast. So GCM has a podcast. If you guys are podcast fans like Camila and myself, you guys can also tune in and listen to other Changemakers stories there. Great. Malia, any resources, opportunities that you like to share?
Yeah, I definitely, so my advice of how to kind of educate yourself on things is to make it really hard to avoid information on it. So like personally, like I love oceans and I love learning about like what's going on with them. And so you'd like go on your socials, follow 10 things, and then you've totally gamed your algorithm. So now forever, your Netflix suggestions are going to be about it. Your Twitter suggestions will be about it. And it's much easier to stay up to date and to learn on something if you have it really easily accessible. So even if it's something where you're like, I think I'm interested in this, I'd like to learn more, I'm not sure yet, or I'm not ready to take an action, just get yourself the information and make it so that it is something that just kind of like pops up in your feed and keeps that going. I think it's really motivating, and it's also kind of a nice way to really get involved in something without too much left right away. But from the Shawn Mendes Foundation, definitely, I would say, if you follow our socials as well, especially the Instagram and the Twitter, we will push out education opportunities. We'll push out trainings from partner organizations. We'll repost different organizations where you can learn more deeply. We try and make sure that we are covering a lot of different issues in ways that you can get involved and just get started in a lot of things, as well as we often will do takeovers and profiles of a lot of our global changemakers and some of our grantees they get the opportunity to share ways to get involved, things to follow, donation links. They'll kind of show you how they have progressed in their journey. And I think that's a really great opportunity to also get kind of a primer on something you weren't really expecting that day, just based on whoever is doing their takeover that day. So I would say definitely through those socials, and we'll push out anything of any new programs that we're launching that have opportunities to get involved or just sign up for anything as well.
Awesome, great. Angela.
Well, I loved all your examples and suggestions. So like I will even use it myself. What I would say to everyone is like make your own opportunities, because the opportunity is not gonna, I mean, it sounds like a cliche, but it's really not gonna come while you're laying in your bed and you're not out there, you know. For example, when I started, how I started is that, you know, I was talking to my boyfriend at the time who was, you know, passionate about those topics of transitional justice, the politics, and, you know, a little by little, I was, you know, reading more. I was, you know, hearing all those horrible, you know, stories, and it was the only thing so far that like made me really passionate about it. That it didn't made me dread going to work for, I don't know, 8 hours or more hours. I mean, I stay at the office even more because it's a wonderful place to be, and it's an honor doing those things. But so as I was feeling that, I wrote myself to the Youth Initiative for Human Rights and one other organization, the Humanitarian Law Center. And I was like, okay, so I'm like doing that, and you guys are awesome. Can I work something with you? I had no idea how like civil society organizations function. Um, but I was like, you're awesome, I'm awesome. Why wouldn't we do things together? And then they actually called me, you know, both of them. I first started volunteering and then working at the Humanitarian Law Center. And at the same time, I was a youth initiatives activist. And since last year, I've been, you know, full-time employed. But it is that, like, you have to say what you want. I mean, no one's gonna, you know, be like, hey, maybe Angela would want this. Like, with Angela, we don't even know her. But like you say, hey, I want that. Hey, did you have some like grant for me? You go to, I don't know, to Malia, to Camila, you ask them, hey guys, I would like to work that. Is there an opportunity at Shawn Mendes Foundation? Or are you working on anything that I can help, you know? So that's like the biggest advice that I can give you.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, girls. Thank you for sharing that. Yes, get out there, share about your idea, ask for opportunities, offer your volunteering time. You can learn a lot about civil society organizations, how to manage projects that way. And of course, just to finish off, Global Changemakers also has lots of opportunities for you guys, online courses, mentoring, seed funding program, everything that you need to, first of all, understand what is your unique role in creating the change you want to see, what are your strengths, what are the resources you have, and then how you put them into practice. And there's a community of people who would like to do the same. So I think something that helps as well is knowing that you're not alone and that there's other people who want to learn with and from you as well. Great, Angela, we got a question here on the Q&A box that I think you can help us answer a little bit. And maybe if the other girls want to jump in, you're welcome to as well. Someone is asking, how do you handle disagreements as an advocate or activist? And I'm directing this question to you first because you worked with political things, transitional justice, and very difficult conversations that I imagine often lead to some disagreement or delicate situations. How have you dealt with that? Do you have any tips on those?
Well, if it's about our disagreements with the, government structure and the officials and everything, like we don't handle them. We are, doing our things and spreading information and making those information available to our youth. That is what we can do. But we also do have disagreements within our own, organizations or the network of organizations, because our contexts are different. The Youth Initiative for Human Rights in Kosovo, let's say, doesn't operate under the same circumstances, and then we have to have also our regular meetings and to maintain the communications in order to avoid, any well, I wouldn't call it a disagreement, but to be sure that we are on the same page, because we wouldn't be working with such sensitive topics if we weren't feeling them deeply. And I mean, there is for the government or the media or the some parts of the public, there is always negative reactions and backlashes and comments. They are always following what you're doing. They may not always, react to that, but like they are following as well as we are. Um, we are following them, and tomorrow is the Youth Day, and we were planning to give one. To write like an open letter for the government and for the youth and for their parents and their aunts and everyone, saying that the youth here is the one that suffers from all those negative narratives from that warmongering, from everything, and those should be silenced and not encouraged. So that is
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much. That's great. And here at the VYS, we've also been speaking a lot about active listening, empathy, and communication, and really understanding where people are coming from and having those dialogues, I think is super important as well. Well, we're getting close to the end. And I wanted to go around before we end and ask if you guys have any other final words of encouragement for the people watching us. As you remember your experience reimagining the future, tackling the challenges and using the opportunities and creating the opportunities to make that better future happen, what's a piece of advice maybe that you would leave with the people watching us? Let's start with Josephine.
So my advice would really be to be aware about what's happening out there, and listen to your own aspirations. And if you have an idea that's growing someone in your mind, listen to this idea and talk about it around you, because maybe it wouldn't happen if you're the only one with this idea, and you would rather share it with the people around you, with your friends. Because I feel like this is how it can actually happen. If other friends are getting super enthusiastic about your idea and say, yes, let's do it. So that's when things would be happening, because you would be a group of people willing to have something happening. So I guess this is what you should do, and not stay alone with this idea, but get strengthened by your friends. And also just a word about the conference we are organizing. Just for you to know, we are launching a youth platform in September, and the Global Changemakers are also helping us with this. So there's going to be tons of activities, of workshops, of surveys, also of consultations in various fields. So in arts, in entrepreneurship, and other kind of thematics. So please, I can send you the link of the webpage, and in September we'll update it with the platform. And it would be great to have all of you 54 youth people participants to also participate in these activities to make the change in higher education with your perspective. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, stay tuned, guys. That's a great opportunity. Let's go with Malia.
Yeah, I think that my greatest advice is something that my mother really taught me, which is that as you're meeting people and as you're building these relationships, that it may not feel like you're super interested in what someone is doing now, or you may like not feel super aligned or have a huge interest in spending time learning about someone, but you never know that in a year or 2 years, the time that you invest in a relationship now and building a relationship with someone, saying thank you, especially if they're opening a door for you, or they're doing something, or they're even just complimenting the work that you're doing, or they're taking time out of their day for you in some way, making sure to say thank you and to really think about the fact that someone is giving your time or their interest, and maintaining and really keeping those relationships, because you never know in a year or 3 years or 5 years when you need something, or when they need something. Maybe there's a partnership that's going to come from it, or maybe there's something you can learn from it. And maybe you're learning something at that time that you don't realize you're even learning yet from that person. And so making sure that as you're operating in the world, that your relationships are the most important thing, and that you're really maintaining and building those, and always saying your thank yous.
Great, that's beautiful. Thank you, Malia. Camila.
Great. So I think my piece of advice would be something that relates to self-knowledge and at the same time with mental health. So nowadays I have been like super reflective about the importance for us to really take care of ourselves on the mental perspective, to really take some time to rest, to take some time to think about our personal goals, do not live a dream that it's not yours. And for example, I can say in my case personally, I was graduated as a lawyer, and I was working at the federal prosecutor office with money washing laundry crimes, and I was not happy. And it was not easy to make the turnaround, right? But somehow I have gave attention to this small voice that was speaking from my heart with me, saying, hey, Camila, that's not you, maybe that's not the place for you, and etc. And sometimes we just go and we smash this voice and we say, no, let's go this way, it's easier. And actually it's not. So when you're doing something that you're not passionate about, it might seem that it's easier, but you would have more chances to turn around and to make a life of it, and in all the senses, like financial senses, personal purpose, everything, if you really connect with that, if you really have a passion for it. So the reason why I'm telling that is because, I mean, there is a lot of like stress, a lot of like anxiety. We know that young generations live with this because the world right now, there is a lot of uncertainty, and this is a big deal, right? It's not something that it's small, sometimes it's really heavy. So really create spaces where you can listen to yourself, where you can be alone, where you can be with the people like you love and you relate well, to really start listen more deeply your passions and the things you want to do. So that's
Amazing.
it.
Super important. Thank you so much, Camila. And Angela, do you have any advice to give us?
Well, I will choose not to give any universal advice, but I will send you guys my email address in the chat, so you can, talk to me and share your stories that I would very much love to hear. And then we can maybe together see if we can connect you with something, if you can maybe participate in some of our programs, or if we can completely imagine something new and work together as partners. So I will leave it to that.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for your time. This has been such an insightful and inspiring discussion. Thank you so much to all the participants who joined us as well. Thank you once again to our interpreters into Spanish. Muchísimas gracias to our interpreter in Portuguese. Muito obrigada mesmo. And we wish that you guys continue with us for the rest of the second day of the event. Right now, well, not right now, in about half an hour from now, we have a skill session in English about team management. And right after that, at about 7:10 UTC, 7:10 p.m. UTC, we have an open mic session in all the 3 languages, which is a great opportunity if you have a pitch to share, maybe a poem, a song, whatever you want to express yourself. It's just going to be an open, safe space for all the participants to share their talents and thoughts and inspirations. And then after that, we have still a few networking and skill sessions. So stay tuned with us. If you haven't joined our Telegram group for the event yet, I'm going to send the links again in the chat. We also have our virtual smile mail. You can drop an encouraging message for other change makers there. You can also create your profile on our networking board to stay in touch with the young people around the world who are joining us. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Camila, Maria, Angela, Josephine. Thank you for your time, and we'll stay in touch. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you guys very much. It was awesome. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.